Hey, welcome to the Integrate This EdTech podcast. I'm David Berner and joined by co-host Jeremy Mikla. And today we have with us a special guest, Keith Krueger, CEO of CoSN, the Consortium for School Networking. We saw Keith not too long ago at the CoSN conference in Chicago. Got to all spend a little bit of time there. It was a great conference. And we're actually looking forward to having this conversation with Keith on a number of different hot topics, but we first really want to start off with just Keith's journey and where Keith started and kind of then to where we got to today. So Keith, welcome to the show, first of all.
Good to be here.
And if you don't mind kind of kicking things off for us, just telling us your journey, because you are like us, you've spent some time in Minnesota, and so you have some experiences here. You're just talking about some friends that you met up with from school. So can you tell us a little bit about your early days?
I do. I grew up in Minnesota on the east side of St. Paul, going to Harding High School. In fact, my family has very strong roots there. My grandfather built the house where my father was born, and my mother died. And my entire family, except for me, I was the black sheep. I went east to Washington, D.C., which began my journey on policy and politics, and which I guess there's some logic in the fact that, when I was in 8th grade and we had to do a career day, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And I for some reason wanted to be a city councilman and interviewed the local city councilman. So I have true nerd roots all the way to my beginning.
Yeah, and you've been with CoSN for a while now, and can you tell us what maybe we could just say what was the state of EdTech when you first started?
Sure. Well, I had worked on Capitol Hill on telecommunications policy, and I was not that interested in the industry fights. I was more interested in how do we use technology to make a difference in schools and libraries and healthcare. And the state of it was, very early on, as the early browsers in 1992, when CoSN was founded, and I started working with them 3 years later. So I've been over 30 years with it. And I think just as I came on board, it was, why would we want to connect school? They said schools, but we really argued for classrooms, that if you only had one connection to a school, that wasn't going to be very good instructionally. So, it was the early days of having a browser, putting the world on the internet. And I think we're at another one of those big inflection moments with AI.
Yeah, and just looking at, so Google came out in, was it 96, I think?
Yeah.
And so you've been around for both that experience where there was that boom and everybody's trying to figure that out, and then you have now this AI boom. What kind of similarities do you see there? Just anything?
I think there are similarities and there are profound differences. The similarity is there's always the hope that every technology will be transformative. Perhaps it is a transformative technology with AI, but only if we make sure that we have the human involved in it and make sure that we're solving real problems. And too often it's sometimes been technology in search of a problem. I'll also say that what the moment that's changed is, for the last 20 years, we could have the assumption that most parents, most policymakers agreed that connecting everyone to the internet was a good thing, and making technology as ubiquitous as possible. I think we're getting a lot of questions in a post COVID moment where parents are saying, we're not liking what we're seeing kids doing on screens. And so there's concerns about that. And I don't think we've always done a good job of talking about how education technology is different than social media and cell phones. So it is a different moment.
Yeah, and I think we plan to get into some of that screen time discussion here in just a little bit here, but CoSN represents technology leaders from across more than 2,000 different school districts. And as kind of the organization that represents those people in that CTO type of a role, what are the issues that are really keeping those leaders up at night? Is it screen times, or or are there many things?
There are many things. The number in terms of our survey, the number one concern, and has been for 8 years, is cybersecurity. And closely related to that is keeping data private and protected. Certainly the challenges right now around cutbacks and funding sources, and how do we use AI appropriately, and that's a fast moving thing. So those are some of the greatest hits of from the education technology community.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I know we've seen around here is some of the schools that have even been targeted for ransom attacks or other cyber attacks. What is it that you think makes schools vulnerable to those types of incidents?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, and a lot of parents and maybe school board members or superintendents say, well, what do we have that's so valuable? And we have a lot of information, and we have what's called a soft target. We're very understaffed. Oh, even though we just said that from a chief technology officer, it's the number one priority. When we ask follow-up questions of, well, do you even have one full-time equivalent dedicated to cybersecurity? Only 1 in 3 school districts do. So what is the information that cyber criminals are trying to get to? And we actually do have a lot of information, personal identifiable about students and families. Where often the school district is the largest employer in a community. And so that information is valuable. We also know it's a high visibility institution. And so when it goes down on the network, that's a challenge. And in fact, Homeland Security has identified K-12 as the number one targeted sector for ransomware. So that means we have a lot of information. You may say, well, what is it about a student that would be valuable? It's particularly valuable because they are clean credit. So, and if you can get them and hold the data for a year or 2 or 5, when they turn 18, the cyber criminals can in fact apply for credit or apply for student loans without the family or the student knowing it. So there's a real challenge there.
Yeah, and I think part of that responsibility too of educating, people about the different threats and in being aware is definitely part of that too. But are there things that CoSN does that helps the CTO and other leaders within the district to prepare them for not just cyber incidents, but other things as well? And I'm thinking kind of like the CETL certification and things, and sharing across different networks that will, help people stay up to date on the most current issues and threats.
Yeah, as a professional association, we like to say that the greatest impediment to effective use of technology is primarily human. It's if you're old enough to remember the Pogo cartoon, I've seen the enemy and it is me. And so therefore, we've tied to a framework of essential skills for the person leading technology, and that informs our CETL certification, the Certified Education Technology Leader. It's the only aspirational based, sector based certification for heads of technology in K-12. But on top of that, we build community, and through the community, we build tools and resources. So in the area, for instance, of cybersecurity, we've taken the NIST framework for cybersecurity, which is very, very comprehensive and complicated, and created a K-12 version of how you might use that. We also have free tools for things like a tabletop experiment. Sometimes it's hard to get those who don't have technology in their title to care about something like cybersecurity. They think it's your problem, not my problem. And so by doing a simulation, a desktop experience, you can much more clearly identify how these things rapidly involve a lot of people, and why it's important. And we have a lot of other resources in terms of privacy of data. We have a legal framework that actually dates decades back to the 1970s with FERPA and other federal laws. But school district leaders often don't know what exactly they should do. So we've created a trusted learning environment seal for school districts to achieve. It's 25 practices that every school district should do in 5 different domains. And actually now you can make progress by getting a badge in each of those 5 areas if you can't quite get to the full certification, the full TLE seal all at once.
I've seen those tabletop exercise happen firsthand. In fact, we've had a couple of different opportunities to lead different groups of district leaders through some of those, situations where, and it's really something to see a superintendent at the table with their district's tech coordinator or CTO, and even bringing in like physical security people, the buildings and grounds crew that oftentimes, are controlling access to the physical access to different buildings on their campus. Yeah. And just seeing them come together, and then, you'll get one of them to say, well, I didn't know that happened when you did this. And,
Yeah.
and like, oh, if this were to happen, how would we respond? And if, what would we do if that, tech leader was on vacation for a week? And, just some of those conversations, I think, really help bring the leadership together so that they can move forward in that cohesive forward direction.
And everything kind of now runs on the network. So your doors, your locks, your security cameras, and we're seeing
systems here.
Exactly. And so, the facility crew may not understand that leaving the security code open to the pre-factory password isn't a good idea. The HVAC system runs on the network. And if once the cyber criminals are in your network, they can access anything.
So Keith, as you've kind of been, there's a number of different issues, but if we dig into AI a little bit more, one of the things that you've been doing is working with the Stanford's Graduate School of Education. And so as you've done that, what are some of the things that are coming out of there that you think districts are needing to hear right now at this time with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and I think one thing is you need to design things to have the human, right, lead with the human, the AI on the side to support the human, to support the teacher, to support the administrator, rather than replace that. That's not a helpful framing to think about. And one of the things we at CoSN have been, again, there's a lot of focus on AI literacy, a lot of focus on AI cheating. We can come back to that. But one thing CoSN's been trying to do is to help school leaders think more holistically, because AI is not one thing. It's going to touch everything in terms of the enterprise of the school district. And so how do you think about how you're going to use AI to do our jobs better, whether it's, on the administrative side, maybe bus schedules, or helping teachers do lesson planning, or things that make their job better. It's easy to, not easy, but I think there's a tendency to jump in to the classroom conversation, which is probably the hardest one to figure out. That's not to say we shouldn't figure out that, but there are some low-hanging fruit around the use of AI that probably would help the life of teachers and administrators in the way that they communicate with parents in ways that are really low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and can you give us some insights too, just on, like, the U.S. Department of Education has some AI grant initiatives, and so as far as like funding for schools, is there a best approach to how some of the funding can work for schools to be able to utilize AI for their teachers and or their students? Or what are you seeing on the funding side of things?
On the funding side, the administration has indicated that AI literacy and preparedness is a priority. And so all of the competitive grants, you can be thinking about how exactly AI might change things right now. So I would be watching for all of those existing competitive programs and seeing how you might use that to advance your AI within your classroom or within your school system.
Okay, yeah, and a lot of districts are, well, like, they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do. I mean, they're kind of all over the place in terms of, even just with banning it or, allowing it, and how do you approach that kind of thing. Do you feel like we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, I guess you could say, as far as like what is responsible use and adoption by a district look like?
I don't know if it's light at the end of the tunnel, but we are definitely seeing movement and progress. We do an annual survey. We've been doing it now for many years. I think it's the 17th year. And there is some interesting data of the last 3 years showing, just 2 years ago, very few school districts had any guidance around AI. We've seen a lot of progress in that area. Now, you can look at other surveys and teachers will still say they're not being trained or prepared. But I will say, from a school district perspective, they are putting emphasis on updating existing guidance. For instance, acceptable use policies. What does that look like in an AI world? And CoSN, along with ISTE and Atlas, which is the Independent School Technology Association, we put out a new updated responsible use guidance resource that's free and on our website. We also see school districts updating their academic integrity policies. You hear a lot of concerns around cheating. And you mentioned Stanford. They did some fascinating research a couple years ago. They had surveyed students the year before ChatGPT, and high school students and middle school students admitted, it's 75-85% of students saying, yes, we cheat. Well, statistically, it was exactly the same every year since with AI. Now, students may be more efficient, get a better answer with AI, but we've had a cheating problem for a long time. And so I think thinking about, is it really that we have an AI cheating problem, or is it that we have a cheating problem? And so updating those academic integrity policies in an AI world is a critical thing. And that means there has to be consequences when you're told not to use AI tools and you use them. there has to be disclosure if you're using them. So some of those things I think we're seeing a lot of progress on. A few school districts are creating freestanding AI policy, but that's probably not the majority yet. And we're starting to see school districts thinking about their policies around data use and governance, and what does that look like in an AI world. It's all very complicated, and I think expecting that we're going to have an answer to all these, or whatever today's answer is, may be different next week, next month, next year.
Do you feel encouraged by we see a lot of different organizations putting out ideas or examples of how these things could be done, CoSN included, right? I mean, CoSN has the maturity matrix of looking at Gen AI, from a whole organizational standpoint in these 7 different domains. And you have other organizations that are focused really on, heavily on the AI literacy piece or things like that. And so do you feel encouraged by the different amounts and those that are offering these free resources out to districts? Or do you sometimes we get sometimes there can be confusion that's caused too, if there's, especially with like AI and how there's so many things available, right? Tools included, right? There are all these different tools, but do you feel encouraged by the exploration and the different things that people are
I am encouraged in the fact that I think the education community, the nonprofits that serve education, have worked hard to create resources. It's probably overwhelming for the average district or teacher. So one of the reasons I like our maturity model is it first of all gives you a comprehensive assessment, and there's some self-assessment tools that you can use to see where you're moving along and where you're not. But there's also a prioritization. You can't do everything at once. And so what is it that's the most important thing from the school system perspective? Starting with the superintendent and the cabinet, and prioritizing what are the areas that we're really going to focus on, because you can't do it all at once.
Okay, so Keith, kind of sticking on this AI theme that we've been on here a little bit, I just want to switch the lens here a little bit and bring more of an accessibility and equity frame to the conversation here. CoSN's AI and Accessibility in Education report argued that AI holds significant promise for students with disabilities, but only if developers build accessibility in from the start. So how wide do you think the gap is currently between what we want to see developers do and what they're actually doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we've tried to partner with our friends at CAST and the rest of the, excuse me, sorry, maybe I should start over. Sorry.
No worries. This is why we record.
If you need a drink of water, you can.
Yeah. I don't have any right. I don't have any right here. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just gonna put this in once, so he can pick it up right when we get back, Jeremy, and then I'm just gonna mark it here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. So accessibility and AI is a critical topic, and we've tried to partner with our friends who are really experts on accessibility at CAST and other organizations. And there is kind of a thoughtful vision around what the possibilities are. I think we're always think and hope that things will move faster, and we hope, but the opportunities are incredible now, not only with special needs, but with language, with just a whole host of the ability to customize content for the unique needs of each learner. And so if if we don't lean into that, we're making a big mistake. And I think what we are starting to be very concerned about is some of the pushback on technology and what implications it might have for the accessibility community. Kids with special needs have need special technologies that help them learn. And so when we have blanket kind of pronouncements that all screens are bad, well, there are kids that the only way they may learn is in front of a screen. And so we have to be much more thoughtful, I think, about some of these emerging concerns.
Yeah, I can think of, several examples where, technology for a lot of students can really be used to help accelerate their learning or to help accommodate their learning. And I think one of the roadblocks that I think from a classroom teacher perspective, and I think back to my time in the classroom as well, that a lot of it, I wanted to customize learning much more to the granular level of an individual student, but it came down to time. And,
Right.
and I couldn't really spend that much time customizing, 30 different plans for 30 different students. But one of the things that AI might be able to do is to step in and maybe create some different opportunities or choices that students might be able to decide what is the best path for me to learn this particular topic or objective or standard. And I think, you mentioned CAST, and they've, I think, done a lot of great work with advancing UDL. And I think that's ultimately what we're getting here to, is that can now be a much more realistic possibility for that classroom teacher.
Yeah, exactly. And you think about the languages that students have and the languages that parents and guardians have, and the ability to much better communicate, not just in English, but in what their native languages.
One of the things here too, and it's along these lines of communication here, is according to the ADA, and districts have now been given a reprieve of 1 year to fully make their online websites and presence and records fully accessible. How are districts doing in that process? Do they need that extra year? Are they thankful for it, or
I think
are they still got a lot
most
of
school
work to do?
districts are very thankful for it. But what I think superintendents and heads of technology need to realize that a year goes by fast, or excuse me, 2 years if you're smaller. But ultimately, everything that you're facing out in terms of your website and whatever needs to be much more accessible, and that is still a requirement. And I think many educators and leaders haven't yet focused on. And so, hopefully with education service agencies like yours, they can get up to speed much faster, and hopefully they're building things going forward. That is, I know we've gone through that journey here at CoSN, and we're a relatively small staffed organization, but having the training and building things to be accessible going forward is so much easier than retrograding and fixing problems that aren't.
All right. So Keith, as another thing that's coming up with that schools are dealing with. So not that there's many things, right, that we've kind of discovered here, but another thing that has come up more recently and has districts trying to figure out what to do about this is the screen time debate and legislation around that. So as you've had an opportunity to engage with some Congress committees on that as well. And so can you at first just kind of inform us and help us understand, like, how did you get drawn into that conversation to testify there at Congress for that debate?
Well, the conversation really has been happening over the last 2 to 3 years. Jonathan Haidt put out a book the anxious generation. And the focus was really on cell phones and social media. But over the last few months, excuse me, I'm sorry, the conversation has broadened to all screens are bad. And there are legitimate concerns that parents and policymakers have around the use of screens, even at school. But we perhaps we haven't done the best job at explaining the difference between education technology and these more consumer personal devices and social media. And we certainly do want students and their parents to not be as focused on distraction. But what we want to focus on is instructionally designed, well thought out education interventions that improve student learning. And unfortunately, we're in a moment where everything is kind of being put together as though all screens are bad. And we were just talking about accessibility, that there are students who can only learn with assistive technologies. And I think, the way that the debate has been framed has been around minutes and hours or bands as opposed to quality. And I think we need to reframe that conversation to say, not every use of technology is appropriate at every moment. And kids should not be in front of a screen all the time. And in fact, they aren't at school. They need to have time out on the playground. They need to have time with Play-Doh. They need to create other things. But there's a good reason why we have technology that's more easily accessible. And sometimes we forget the fact of how did we get here? We wanted to have a ubiquitous environment that's robust to enable kids to have a more personalized learning. And yes, there are sometimes some places, some teachers are using technology as digital babysitters, and maybe we need to be more clear that that's not appropriate. But there are great ways that we've seen where technology can, in fact, make a big difference. And we need to be much more intentional and thoughtful in talking to parents and school board members and superintendents about why we're using technology.
Yeah, and I think you kind of covered all that really well with just it's not that all screen time is bad. It's just that there should be a purpose and a design to using screens for instructional time. And I like what you said too about it. Like, unfortunately, you are going to have where it's sometimes used as a babysitter, but we need to really talk about the nuance there of when is a good time for screen use and why does it help aid students in what they're trying to do and prepare them for the future as they continue on. Because it's if you just ban them all outright, the reality still is there where, well, they're still going to be using it as we do for our jobs as we continue on and leave school, right?
And there are efforts to, go back to paper and pencil. Well, not every use of paper and pencil is quality. So let's evaluate these things, which is a better way of teaching and learning. I've been around a long time, and so I think back to the television debates. And, there's a big difference between the Simpsons and Sesame Street. Sesame Street was instructionally designed. So no, we don't want a Simpson-like education technology in our classroom, but we probably do want instructionally designed things like Sesame Street or Schoolhouse Rock. We have to have a more thoughtful conversation. And unfortunately, counting minutes or pushing for bans is easy, but it probably isn't the right way to go.
Yeah, and one of the things that CoSN has done is you've published a policy briefing on that for state leaders to understand this debate, right, and what's going on. And so what is the number one thing that you think is important to get across to school and district leaders about this, so that they have a good understanding of what's going on with these bills that are being?
I think there's we certainly have to start by saying there are legitimate concerns. Secondly, we have to say that there's a difference between consumer technology and educational technology. And what we're arguing for is tying that use of technology for an instructional purpose and making sure that we have quality, and we're not arguing around just quantity.
Yeah, and then on the opposite side, we have where there are folks that are going to be voting on these type of things. What do you think that any governor or state legislature should understand before casting a vote for that on one of these bills?
I think there's been a real rush to judgment in the last few months in state legislatures around the country, where they're putting age limits on any technology, particularly at the youngest grades, and then at higher middle school and high school, putting time limits, saying 45 minutes or an hour. And I'm not sure that policymakers understand the reality of how complicated that would be. For instance, at a middle or high school where you have multiple teachers, how exactly do you divide up? And it's just the wrong question. It's not getting to whether we're using the technology in a way that advances education. So sometimes we have to take a deep breath. We have to admit there are concerns, legitimate concerns around distraction, around mental health use of social media, but that shouldn't be confused with hopefully the way that we're using technology in our schools.
I know schools have control over the things, or they desire to have control over the things that happen within their buildings and within their scheduled times of day. But kids have, and kids spend a significant amount of time in school.
They do.
But they also spend a significant amount of time outside of school, under the supervision of their parental unit or guardian, whatever that happens to be for their situation or their family. But how can schools work with parents so that we have to, we want to see kids coming into school that are getting messages that the parents support what schools are doing. And we want to make sure that schools can be there to support the things that parents want for their students at the same time.
Well, and I think we hear a lot of stories of where parents have found out that their student or another student has been exposed to some inappropriate materials, pornography or whatever. And I think school district leaders, heads of technology, need to better explain that when you're on the school network, when you're on a school provided device, it is in fact filtered. Now, that's not to say that kids don't try to break it, that the filters don't fail, but I can say without a question that in most cases, your child is a lot safer on a school provided school network than they are on a personal device on at home. And so we need to better explain that in fact there is a legal requirement. Every school district that gets E-rate funding requires compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act. So that is a fundamental requirement. And I don't think that there's a presumption that and a lot of times, if kids are using things that aren't on the school network, they do have access to a lot of things that are inappropriate. And we have to have a partnership with parents to help them understand ways to limit screens, on personal time, and including for themselves as
Mhm.
as role models for their children.
Yeah, and I've seen some of that too. I think even within raising my own kids, is that what they see me doing, they're following, and being that model, both in the classroom as the teacher, but then also as the parent, and setting that expectation. In fact, I think one of the parts of uh, Jonathan Haidt's book, Anxious Generation, that I really appreciated was his emphasis on play
Mhm.
and the students getting the opportunity to have that self-directed play where they need to work out their own rules, work out their own disputes, and really become, that grown up that we want them to become, because they know how to work with people, they know how to deal with stressful situations, they know how to compromise, and they know how to still have fun. And
Exactly.
and I know he took, I think, some of that from the book Stolen Focus by, I think, Johan Hari. That I think those, I see parallels between those different things, and schools can do that, I think, within certain moments, but it also needs to happen when they're outside the buildings.
Right. Completely agree that and helping parents understand what their role is. Not that we're dumping all responsibility on them, but they have to be a partner in this effort. And yeah, and I think I know we'll be coming out with some better toolkits on how to have that conversation with parents at a PTA meeting or with the school board at the school board meeting.
Yeah. So, Keith, let's kind of switch gears here a little bit, considering that we have such an expert on federal policy when it comes to technology and education. Um, in 2025, President Trump signed an executive order aimed at blocking states from crafting their own AI regulations. Um, from your vantage point, representing school districts, what's the risk of a regulatory vacuum, or making it so that we have 50 different state approaches?
I think there's a framing at the national level that we are going to fall behind China or other countries. And what worries me from an education perspective is we have a responsibility first and foremost to keep kids safe. And so we shouldn't be deploying, and we can't have a Silicon Valley mindset of try it out, break it, fix it, because these are kids. And so I think we have to be very thoughtful about how we do that. That doesn't mean we need to prohibit everything, but we need to test things out in safe ways, in sandboxes and things like that, virtual sandboxes, I guess I should say, to make sure that they play out the way we do. And I think we have seen some problematic AI chatbots that have given bad advice to students or not responded to the crisis that they were stating. And so these things really have to be designed in a way that is safe and effective.
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit earlier too, E-rate, where a lot of public schools get their funding to help for their technology initiatives and infrastructure that they have in place. And how much of a threat is E-rate under in our current, political world that we live in?
It's a great question, and you're right. E-rate is the number one funding source for education technology and has been. Excuse me. And last year we were very concerned because there was a Supreme Court case striking at the constitutionality of E-rate and all of universal service. E-rate is part of a program that's been around for 70 years, connecting rural America to basic telephone service. Excuse me. And fortunately, the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, said it absolutely is constitutional. And so the threat to that has been stopped in terms of the threat of being declared unconstitutional. There are other significant challenges, and they're long-standing ones around the funding base. It's historically been a tax on long-distance charges, and there's increasing cost to connect schools, libraries, healthcare facilities, rural America, and yet the funding base has stayed the same as if it was 20 years ago. And so some of our organizations are working together to try to encourage Congress to fix the contribution factor. And that's a little geeky and not that interesting for educators, but critical that we solve the funding base for it.
Yeah, it absolutely is critical, because if you're not going to get the funding for it, then teachers aren't going to be able to implement it in the classroom.
Exactly. We're very lucky. When I go around the world, other places are shocked that we have every classroom and has broadband pretty much to every school and classroom in the country, and it's done in a pretty affordable way.
So Keith, we've talked about a number of different things, and so as you start to look at the road ahead and what's next for EdTech, if you could give every district technology leader just one piece of advice, if that's all you could give them for navigating the next 2 years, AI, screen time policy, budgets, all these different things that we've touched upon, what would you say for advice to give them?
I think you need community. You need to find your peers. Often the education technology leader is the only person in a school district thinking about some of these things. And so you get involved in either the state chapter or the national of CoSN. I think also you're going to have to do a better job of communicating why we're using technology, the questions, and if you answer them in a non-defensive way and are legitimate that we haven't always used technology in the perfect way, but we can't leave kids behind. We can't wait till they're 18 until we, put them in a world where they have tools and resources. So that's where I'd start. And I think with financial challenges that many school districts are facing, we're going to have to prioritize what is the most important and impactful things that have a difference in terms of teaching and learning. And we're going to have to make sure that superintendents and school boards are our partners in that effort.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. But we're kind of nearing the end of our time here together, Keith, and so I want to prepare you for our lightning round that we have coming up here. David and I will alternate some questions here that we'll ask of you, and you can feel free to give a one-word or a one-sentence response or a one-paragraph, however you'd like to elaborate here. But I'm going to kick it off here with the first question for you. And it is one that I hope sets an optimistic tone here. But what gives you genuine hope about the future of public education and technology? What keeps you energized?
I sit on a board with all of the other national organizations, teacher unions, school boards, superintendents, principals, and I don't think it's always conveyed to the public, but they actually agree on an awful lot of things about where we want to go, how we want to prepare our kids for workforce development. And so I am optimistic in the sense that I think people they don't agree on every single thing, but they agree on many critical, important things, and we need to better convey that to parents and policymakers.
All right. I have a really tough one here next for you, Keith. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well,
If it wasn't a politician, how about that?
yes. Unfortunately, I don't know. As I said, for career day, I went and interviewed the mayor of St. Paul. So my nerdness, I didn't quite make it there, but I did get into policy and politics.
You know, assuming that politician probably wasn't your first job, what was young Keith doing in high school?
In high school, the Minnesota State Fair was my very first job. I worked at the Prime Steakhouse, which bussing tables. It was not the most exciting job. My best friend, his uncle, owned that, and he got to be in the ice cream parlor that was connected to it, which was a much better job. So I learned quickly it's all in who you know.
All right. What's your current guilty pleasure TV show or movie right now?
I just finished Hacks on HBO, and I loved it. I thought it was very clever and funny.
What's the best meal you've ever had? Or a certain type of food that you go to if you can't recall the one time.
I love like Thai food. I find it. I just like it.
What's something people would be surprised to know about you?
I went on from Beijing to Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia on the Trans-Mongolian train, which is a 36-hour train ride through the mountains and plains of kind of looks like of Montana, big sky country.
Cool.
Cool.
If David and I were hosting a conference, and it's going to be tomorrow, and you're keynoting it, and you're standing backstage, and we have someone says, Keith, what's going to be your walk-up song as we send you out onto stage to get the audience all riled up? What would you want played?
Well, it probably has to be Elton John's He's Still Standing.
Good. All right. This next one's rapid fire. This is our this or that portion. So you can only choose one. And so we'll just go through these. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
All right. Road trip or flight?
I tend to avoid road trips, a flight.
Cook at home or eat out?
I'll say cook at home.
Okay. Text or call?
Call.
Mountains or beach?
Mountains in the winter, at least, or skiing.
And the last one, to leave the party or first one out the door?
Probably the last one out of the party. My spouse would definitely say that.
Well, Keith, it's just been a pleasure having you here. And we just want to give you a little bit of a time here that if you want to share anything out where people could contact you or get a hold of CoSN, or if you have anything in the near future coming up that you'd like to promote, we want to give you the stage.
Sure. Well, we have lots of things on our website at CoSN.org, and I would particularly mention our updated responsible use guide that we put out last month that hopefully will help people take their traditional acceptable use policies, which were all about a bunch of don'ts, and think about the do's.
Perfect. Well, Keith, it's been a pleasure. We hope to connect with you again here soon. It sounds like we're going to be at a couple of similar places coming up this month. So looking forward to it.
Looking forward to St. Cloud for the AI Summit.
Yeah, we'll see you there. Thanks, Keith.